Good afternoon. So if you can put up the slide, please. So it's good to see so many people here. Hopefully we can arrange some seats so that many can be seated. Is someone putting up the slides? So anyway, as we get the slides up, I just wanted to mention that one of the key inspirations for the Green Roads Toolkit was really the announcement by ADB, maybe more than a year ago now, that from July of last year, all our projects, particularly sovereign projects, should be Paris aligned, so aligned to the goals of the Paris Agreement on climate change. And within the guidance that was developed, there was a specific requirement that we put there to say projects must demonstrate within it that they will make projects as green as possible. But then the question was, how green should the project be? So then developing this kind of knowledge base that can provide project teams with tangible, practical guidance on how to make projects green was necessary. So that's why we did it. So it looks like we're having some technical issues with the materials. So I will continue talking anyway. So then to really develop this toolkit, we wanted to try and tackle green roads holistically. So we looked across several dimensions. So decarbonization, it's okay. The slides are not there. Okay, so I'll just make it up. Yeah. So we looked across many issues. So the key driver was, what are the key issues that we need to address in the road sector that we need to tackle? So there are things like decarbonization. We know that roads are responsible for about 18% of energy-related greenhouse gas emissions. Yeah. If we are supposed to decarbonize transport, we must decarbonize roads as well. But then looking at it from that perspective, if you look at it, most of the emissions in roads come from the use of the vehicles. Okay, so how can a road agency, who will actually be the main authority using this tool, tackle that? They are not actually responsible for policies on how people should buy e-mobility and so on. But what they could do is they could support charging infrastructure. They could support active mobility, for example, or they could support the transition to more cleaner transport by providing that connectivity. So those kind of practices would be included. So what we're aiming for, to look for practices that will make the most impact in the first instance. And then we looked at other dimensions like climate resilience, which is a big problem, water and land management, inclusive growth, and others. So the key main objective of this session is really to dive deep, get you to use the toolkit, and provide us with feedback on how well it performs, but also what should be improved, okay? Because this will be a live toolkit, we will be updating it as we go along. So we look forward to receiving your feedback on that regard. Now, before I conclude, I just wanted to mention one thing, which is to acknowledge the big contributions of many colleagues who are here. So within ADB, to develop this toolkit, we had a big working group or reference group within ADB, which consisted of staff from the transport sector office, but also from all other sectors and teams around ADB. They came together to support the development of this toolkit. But we also have our consultants here from MetaMeta and from the IRF, who put a great effort to try and deliver this version of the toolkit to us. So thank you to Frank, Gordon, Anastasia, and everybody else for that great effort. But I shouldn't forget that there were lots of other peer reviewers and experts many seated here who also contributed to this. Most of them actually did this voluntarily without requesting for any payment. And today you'll hear from some of them. They will share some of the transformative practices that they have included in the toolkit so that you can actually utilize this going forward. So a big thank you to all who contributed. I can't mention everybody, but thank you for this effort. And before I leave the stage, let me mention this. So this is the first step in the toolkit. So what you'll see is kind of like a database, a collection of practices with some guidance on how to use it. But the work is continuing. We want to get to a stage where we can provide project teams and governments with the guidance to say, how green is my project, okay? And then from a national perspective, to ask the question of, what are some of the barriers that exist within governments to scale up green roads implementation, and how can we work with you to address those barriers? So those work is continuing, and we continue rolling out those outputs as we go along. So with that, I'd like to stop here and then hand back to Rebecca.
Thank you very much, Michael. And yeah, that is a question that we've all been grappling, which is, please make sure your project is green. Well, how can we do that? So I'm looking forward to learning more today about how we can do that together. I'd now like to introduce Mr. Majid El-Abiad. Please forgive my pronunciation, Majid. He serves as the Executive Vice President and Deputy to the President and CEO of the International Road Federation. With over 2 decades of management experience, he specializes in national and international transportation and construction industry issues, focusing primarily on road asset management and road financing. And he's here to tell us today the IRF perspective on the importance of the Green Roads and Green Roads Toolkit. And he's going to be joining us, I hope, virtually from Washington, DC. Yes, here he is. Thank you. Please help me to welcome Majid.
Well, hello, everyone. Can everybody hear me?
Can you hear us, Majid?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can. Great. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Now I'm having issues with my my video. It says you cannot start a video because the host has stopped it. Not a big deal. I can speak without the video. Just informing the tech team here.
Maybe just go ahead while the tech team tries to get you up. We can see that you started screen sharing.
Yeah, so since I don't have a video, I think this will serve as a good background while I speak. So again, good day, everyone, and thank you, Rebecca. I'm speaking here from Washington, D.C., where it's 2 o'clock in the morning, but it's still really a pleasure to be here and give some introductory remarks about this Green Roads Toolkit. So again, I'm honored to present this transformative initiative in the realm of road construction and maintenance. This is a collaborative effort, as everybody knows, orchestrated by the Asian Development Bank, MEDA, and the International Road Federation, or how we sometimes call ourselves IRF Global. So this toolkit is a cornerstone in our collective pursuit of sustainable infrastructure and environmental conservation. And we commend the Asian Development Bank for their sponsorship and delivery of this initiative. The IRF, we've long championed the cause of better, safer, and more sustainable roads and road networks worldwide. Our commitment goes beyond mere connectivity. It's about creating roads and mobility systems that harmonize with our environment and foster sustainable economic growth. Our motto since our founding in 1948 has always been better roads, better world. This Green Roads Toolkit embodies the spirit and the mission of the IRF. So this comprehensive framework hopefully will be instrumental in embedding environmental considerations into road projects' life cycles. It is designed to aid policymakers, planners, and engineers in evaluating the ecological impacts of their road initiatives and exploring sustainable solutions. So the significance of this toolkit, it's not just theoretical. It will have practical applications that ensure road projects do not merely meet the transportation needs, but also address crucial environmental issues such as biodiversity conservation, pollution reduction, and efficient water use. This strategic approach aligns with our global sustainability goals, making the toolkit a tangible and relevant tool in our global efforts. Through workshops, training sessions, and seminars, the ADB, IRF, Meta, and all our partners will work diligently to promote the adoptions of the toolkit's principles globally. We will engage with governments, donors, and the private sector to make sure that this Green Roads Toolkit resonates. In conclusion, the Green Roads Toolkit is more than a guideline. It's a visionary approach to road development. It encapsulates the IRF's mission to pave the way for sustainable infrastructure that future generations will inherit. Let us champion this cause and strive for a future where development and sustainability go hand in hand. And before I conclude my opening remarks, I would just like to invite the audience to two upcoming IRF global events that could be of interest to the audience. So the first one is our IRF Asia Pacific Regional Congress, which is nearby in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And it's a multi-theme conference that will focus on issues from strategic asset management to green roads to smart mobility infrastructure. So we hope to see some of you in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and we're also working on having a Green Roads Toolkit during that Congress. And finally, our annual global conference, which invites participants from all over the world with very similar themes, and we'll also be promoting the Green Roads Toolkit and having a workshop on it at that event, and that will take place in Orlando, Florida, from December 10 to 13 of this year. And here, just a quick calendar of our events. We're a very active organization all around the world. I'm not going to spend too much time, but I wanted just to give the audience a grasp of the activity of the IRF. And that's it. Thank you very much. And that concludes my remarks. And
thank you very much, Majid, and thank you for joining us in the middle of the night. So I hope you can now
yeah, no problem. My pleasure.
Thanks.
I wish that camera had worked, but for some reason it's not.
Next time. Maybe it's good if it wasn't working at 2 a.m, but
yeah, I know it's 2:30 in the morning, so yeah.
Thank you. Thanks very much for that. Okay. So next, I would like to invite the team leader for the Green Road Toolkit study, which is Dr. Gordon Keller, and he's going to give us an introduction to the Green Roads Toolkit. So please welcome Gordon.
Well, thank you and good afternoon, everyone. I have to say it's indeed a great pleasure to be involved in this whole event here, and as well as kind of an honor. And I'm a geotechnical engineer, a dirt and rocks civil geotechnical engineer, and so I've always worked with roads engineering. But most of my career, I've worked with a land management agency, the United States Forest Service, and we have a huge transportation system, but the big emphasis, or a huge emphasis, is environment. It's social issues, it's wildlife crossings and biological issues, it's protecting water quality. And so all these different elements to the Green Roads Toolkit that we're working on here it fits exactly into those themes. They're things we're trying to promote. So the social, water quality, soils, erosion, they all fit as parts of the theme. Also, I wanted to thank Michael and Rebecca and Ian and the others with the ADB here who really helped us support us in promoting or starting this whole project. Frank and Anastasia, my team here, that have been wonderful and hardworking trying to pull this whole thing off. And all of you, thank you, because in matter of fact, we're looking forward to getting more practices, just feedback, ideas, because it's a compilation of ideas that we're working on. So, why do we need them? I think most of you have probably seen these sort of statistics. There's 1.7 billion people in Asia that really don't have access to where they need to go, to the hospitals, to the to farm to market roads to get their goods to markets. We need roads, but they're negative at times. They're positive. We're looking at both sides of roads, the good and the bad of it. There's 8 million kilometers of new roads that are going to be built by 2030, and already then there'll be 29 million kilometers of roads. A huge number of roads, and so they serve a lot of people, but they also create a lot of impacts, which we're trying to minimize and achieve this sustainability. And the costs are huge. There's a major amount of funds that need to be taken or spent to pull off this this road system that's really is needed. And so the goal is to create safe, sustainable roads. And it's pretty much consistent with like the Paris Agreement, the Sustainable Development Goals, and other goals that have been developed. So what is the Green Roads Toolkit? I'm putting this one in. It's an old version here, but the nine different components that we're particularly focusing on are decarbonization, climate resilience, water and land management, reducing pollution, improving quality of life, preserving biodiversity, disaster preparedness, sourcing sustainable materials, and fostering inclusive growth. And those are the 9 elements you'll find that are in this booklet here that you have. So, but being a ground-pounding engineer that I am, I also wanted to keep in mind this component, the regular roads part that's over here. On the top, mainly because as an engineer, I've always practiced, tried to promote and do training on engineering best practices. But one of the big problems I've seen in so many failures of problems with the roads is lack of good application of those best practices. So a lot of storm damage weren't from major storms as much as just bad, not inadequate engineering. And lack of compaction, for instance, or not properly installing a culvert, or grasses without deep enough roots to really stabilize the slopes. So, in fact, what I see is the need for your basic engineering combined with green roads to give us something that's truly sustainable. And what we've done, we pulled together almost 150 different practices for road management, planning, design, and construction. And these are to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, improve resilience, improve our qualities of life, improve management of the environment. And we'll go through a little bit later some of the filters and ways that we approach this in the toolkit itself. And basically, I feel like there's a lot of discussion about green roads. You hear it, you read about it in many places, and see our contribution has basically been trying to pull together what are those practices. What are really the specific things that can be done to truly implement green roads. Where do they come from? We've searched far and wide. We had an open call early on of good practices, and I think about 25 different agencies and entities responded to us and gave us a lot of great ideas that are now some of the practices. We looked at many documents and tried to get at people's experiences worldwide. We've depended a lot on our own personal judgment, and I think collectively we probably have, I shouldn't count our ages, but I won't say hundreds of years, but quite a few years, of what we've gotten information on. And it's meant to be a living document. That's why it's what we're producing now. We hope we'll keep adding to it, because as people, I think at this conference so far, I've thought about 5 other practices that we should have written up that we will add to the toolkit as time goes on. And I'm hoping we can get good information from you folks. So, what it does, it really helps us, it kind of guides us in the things we should be doing to promote this whole concept of green and sustainable roads. It tells you what you maybe are not doing and should be doing. And so, and part of it we'll be explaining later on is there's these filtering factors, because there's a lot of different practices, so you want to focus on which ones really apply to your situations. So let me just go through quite quickly the different areas we're looking at. Decarbonization, looking at things like, particularly like EVs, electric vehicles, tree side planting, more efficient road networks, green cement, which can use a lot less energy in the production of the cement. Climate resilient practices like better road drainage, better and more careful design of culverts, deeper rooted vegetation, use of bioengineering, in addition to other structural fixes for slope stabilization. Road maintenance, just staying up on road maintenance is extremely important. Water and land management, things like how we use channel water for groundwater recharge to take use of water that's coming off the road. As an engineer, I was always trying to get rid of the water. Frank and his team at the Metro are always trying to use the water, and we need both. Erosion control, things like that come under water and land management. Reducing pollution, a lot of things that, with roadside vegetation, reducing less dust and noise from roads are things we can do to minimize the pollution that comes from roads. And road pollution accounts for many, many deaths worldwide every year. And so it's an area where we need to be working. Using products like de-icing and dust palletives that aren't toxic, things like that. Quality of life, we all need these roads, but we don't want it to be damaging. We want to maximize the quality. So that's why we want to reduce noise from the roads. We want to have come up at times in cool pavements in these heat islands so that we don't, not dealing with extreme temperatures. We want to separate bikes and pedestrians from traffic, just from traffic safety standpoint. I love scenic pullouts and things like that on highways when I'm driving, because it just makes the driving experience more pleasurable. Quality of life. Preserving biodiversity. This is a huge one when you think that millions of animals are killed annually. Actually, I think it's something like about 1 million a day worldwide are killed by vehicles in cars. Thousands of people get killed. Billions of dollars are spent annually because of wildlife impacts. And so, we're protecting not only the vertebrates, but also the invertebrates, those little critters, the frogs that you hate to run over. And we can do that with wildlife crossings, better fish passage arrangements in streams, and just protecting and preventing wildlife or habitat fragmentation as much as possible. Careful planning of roads. Disaster preparedness is the other side of climate resilience. It's keeping things either how to deal with the disasters, how to respond to them, and how to recover from them. And so there's a lot of practices that go in that, but better traffic management, good evacuation plans in the Western, or a lot of many places in the world with fires these days. We want to make sure we have access for that fire equipment, things like that. And sustainable materials. Roads use a huge amount of just billions of tons or millions of tons of asphalt every year. And we're running out of gravel, we're running out of sand. It's shipped all over the world, which is crazy. But so part of the challenge is to use local materials, to recycle materials, to use, be able to use some marginal materials, all things we can do to reduce the amount of energy that has to go into the production. Developing quarry sites closer to a project so you don't have to have as much transport and the energy expended into transport. And the last, inclusive growth, roads are for people, but they can also serve people in terms of employment, having local jobs in their promoting roadside businesses. I really like places where they've developed community maintenance teams that can go out, particularly in rural areas. Fair sourcing of materials, where that material is coming from. That last mile access to the bridge, bridges and trails. So there's many things we can do here. And to kind of wrap it up here a little bit, so the toolkit, we have, and we'll be exercising, we'll be using it here. There's areas of interest because you have to decide what your circumstances are. Are you in the mountains? Are you in an arid region? Are you in a design phase or a maintenance phase? And so that helps focus on which one of the practices is most useful for you, most relevant. And it looks like this. You'll be like you're seeing at each one of these tables where you've got your areas of application up on top. I don't know which way to shine this to. too many screens. Anyway, the areas of application, you've got the enabling factors, and then that comes down and focuses and helps you select which one of these many practices is most relevant to your situation. And, and you may want to look at others, and it depends on whether you're thinking about decarbonization or climate resilience, but there's also a lot of overlap between some of these different themes. Some of the ways, if you look at in the toolkit, as you go through it, each one of the practices has this type of information. There's several pages, 2 or 3 pages. We try to keep it, reasonably brief, but it's quite a tome as it is. Detail of what goes into the practice, what the issue is, examples, illustrations, photos of what applies for that particular theme, a discussion of some of the costs and benefits, a discussion of some of the enabling factors, or things that are constraints, things that get in the way to be able to implement these practices. And last, of course, good references, because this is just a screenshot of each one of these themes, and so there's a lot of good other much more in-depth references behind each one of these themes that you can go to. So with that, I'll leave you with my thoughts about this whole thing is that we only have one planet to live on. Unless you're Elon Musk and feel like we need to be up on Mars, but I'm not quite ready for that yet. So I think we're stuck here for the time being. So the point is we need to keep our world as livable and sustainable as possible, and Green Roads is just one way we can help do that. So with that, I'll say thank you. You'll need that.
Yes. Thank you very much, Gordon, for that overview of the Green Roads Toolkits and some of the practices that we're going to dive into this afternoon. All right, so the next step, we're actually going to dive a little bit deeper on some of the technical practices that are included in the toolkit. And so to facilitate our panel, as well as a short Mentimeter survey, just to understand, the level of Green Roads knowledge that we might already have in the room, is Dr. Frank van Steenbergen, and he'll be moderating our panel discussion this afternoon. So please welcome Dr. Frank.
Yes, Rebecca, thanks a lot. And we are really overwhelmed with the turnout and people standing up. We'll try to arrange some more chairs, but we're really happy with that. We discussed a lot about green roads, and also what Gordon said was with the toolkit we've tried to sort of pull everything together and sort of more or less define what is a green road. But we would like to do a small Mentimeter with you. So yeah, maybe if you can go to Mentimeter or you scan this, we have a few small questions for you, and basically to sort of assess where we are at the moment. Can you all log in to the Mentimeter? I think people are doing this. If you can scan it with your camera, or you go to Menticom and then you use the code. I think 38 people have already been able to do it. I'm usually among the last ones, so I give you a bit of time. Yeah. So still some are coming, actually. Okay, good. Maybe we can go to the questions, yeah? The first question is, yeah? And it should be on your phone, yeah? So what does Green Road means to you? Just give 1 or 2 words, yeah? Just type it in, yeah? What does Green Road, mean to you, yeah? Okay. I think the big one is really sustainable, but I also think we see some nice, visionary things like good to the environment, environmentally friendly, future-proof, future development, and I think some technical issues which I think are really also important. We'll come to that, like drainage, yeah, proper maintenance. So I think, we'll sort of less cut trees, yeah, so less pressure on the environment. Also, I saw one person said lesser roads. I think that what Ian said, that there will be a lot more roads, and I think that is really the challenge upon us, that if we need to increase the access, we also have a huge ability to do this better and reduce the footprint. So yeah, let's go to the next question. So this more is, are you familiar with good practices for green roads? Is this something that you've, are already very familiar with, not at all familiar with, slightly familiar with, extremely familiar with? That person should really sort of, make himself known to Gordon, Anastasia, Michael, Rebecca, and me, because we really, actually, the toolkit is really the product of this sort of collective wisdom. Slightly familiar is, I think that's why you came here, probably, yeah. And yeah, I think we have still some people answering it. So yeah, I think the sort of point of gravity is slightly familiar, tilted towards moderately familiar. And yeah, I think those two experts, please, we'll invite you for a coffee and some nice things to go with it. So then the last question for now. How confident are you? One is, are you familiar, but how confident are you to use Green Roads practices in your work? Yeah, is the sort of unknown and bit of a scary territory, or is it something that you sort of feel, yeah, this can go already? So yeah. 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 So I think this is quite interesting, the way it looks now, is that, I mean, a lot of people are at least moderately confident of using green roads, but less knowledgeable about it. So I think this is great. That means that we all want it, but we still sort of need to catch up a little bit on what can be done, yeah, if I summarize this. Yeah, I think this is probably it. Everybody's given an answer, and yeah, I want to give you a hand. I think it shows that you are keen and also willing, so let's make the best of the rest, yeah? I think next, Rebecca will go to the panel, yeah? So, as Michael already said, a lot of people contributed to the Green Roads Toolkit, and fortunately several people are with us today. And we want to invite them to give a presentation and take a floor then in the panel. So the first person I want to invite is Filippo. Filippo has 2 PhDs. I think that is already quite an achievement, and has worked a lot in road projects, airport projects, a lot of innovations, and also among all those innovations on the use of recycled material. And this is what you will present. Give a hand to Giuseppe. Filippo.
Thanks, Frank, and good afternoon, everybody. My presentation today is probably presenting one of those many practices that Gordon referred to, and which is specifically the use of recycled materials in roads, not just as a way to use more sustainable material, but also in some way you can engineer some of this material to create some sort of strategy against climate change, and in this particular case, some climate adaptation strategies. I would like to acknowledge Hussein Ada, over there at the back, from ADB, sponsoring this project. And this project was specifically related to Papua New Guinea. So is there anybody from PNG here in the room? Any friend from PNG? Nice to see you. So first of all, I just wanted to start by saying what can happen if you say that climate change doesn't exist and it's neglected. And all the photos that I put here, they are photos from Australia, which is where I'm from, and they're all photo taken in the past 3 years. So you can see that roads are melting, and the binder, the bitumen, the asphalt is picked up by the truck tires. You can see down here at the bottom left what's happening. These are flash floodings, and they usually happen within a few minutes, and it takes weeks to recover and to make sure that you create some sort of a passageway for emergency vehicles to go through if they need to reach out. So we should consider that, and that's probably part of this TA funded by ADB, which is divided in 2 phases. The first one was an exploratory study for the specific case of PNG on the possibility to reuse recycled plastics in roads. Not waste plastic, but recycled plastics. I will show you what the difference is in a moment. And the phase 2 of this project is actually building a real road in Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea using recycled plastic. Papua New Guinea, and that's not according to me, but according to their own Conservation and Environment Protection Authority, PNG has the highest rate of plastic waste mismanagement among the South Plastic Region Environment Program. And the current recycling rate of recycled plastic is close to 0. And if you're keen to find that out, that I'm not lying to you, you can easily Google plastic waste in Papua New Guinea, and you will find plenty of images like this. It's not really difficult to find plastic waste in PNG. And some of these photos, I've taken it myself. The one at the bottom center corner, because it was close to the hotel where I was at. And plastic is becoming a big issue, not just in Papua New Guinea, but in a lot of different countries. So one of the good practices in the Green Road Toolkit is the use of recycled materials. Now, this is still in a waste type of stage. It's not recycled yet, but we'll get there through the presentation. So when somebody, usually when I present these sort of things, people think that we're taking waste from landfill and we're just putting into a road thereby creating a new landfill. But that's not really the case. To me, recycled plastic or waste plastic, originally, it was born like a polymer type of thing, okay? So from that polymer, you use it to build a product, which can be a plastic bottle, but it can be also your kids' toys or anything made out of plastics, really. So what we do is, once we use it and it becomes a waste, we just need to reprocess that waste, to recycle that waste, to make it back to a polymer phase. And what you can see is that there is a difference in color. So they are not 100% the same, but they're quite similar because originally they were the same thing. And we use that as a way to modify our roads, okay? Now, I took the example here of a plastic bottle, which is not really a type of plastic that we commonly use in roads, but there are many other types of plastic objects, and plastic is not just one thing. There are so many different variations of plastics, and each and every one of them has a specific engineering property, and we can exploit those properties to make better roads. It's not just adding something that is inert, that doesn't do anything. We actually use and select certain type of plastics because they can melt, for instance, at the mixing, paving temperature, thereby creating a sort of a polymer modification to our asphalt materials. So the idea for this project in PNG was actually to change from the upper line up there, which is the current management practice, waste management practice in Papua New Guinea, which is quite linear type of economy. You just produce it plastic, consume plastic, landfill plastic. And all the waste in PNG goes into a landfill site, which is becoming quite full, and it's becoming quite full quite rapidly also. So they need to expand the landfill site. And we want to convert that into something more circular down at the bottom, where you're actually using, but then it goes through a recycling process and it goes back into the production stage. So that was the idea of the project, and we are getting there quite comfortably, I would say, because a lot of people are following this up, and a lot of industry interest has been raised through this project. That's what I wanted to present you before. There is a big difference between waste plastic and recycled plastic. And waste plastic, the one you can see at the left-hand side, they use whatever was a waste, just ground and shredded. But in the middle, you can find dirt, you can find metal, you can find paper, you can find construction materials, a lot of different things. Recycled plastic, it's a different story, because to get to that point, you need to transform the waste all the way back to the original polymer. And to do that, you need to get the waste collected, then sorted, meaning separating different types of plastics. I show you the different types, then shredding it, then extruding, and then you can pelletize it into those small bits, those small pellets, which is the final product that we use at the end as a polymer, not as a waste anymore, but as a resource at that point. This is just the video. Because when we are producing roads, the temperature is high. You can see that after mixing with the acid, the plastic disappears, because we selected a particular type of plastic that actually melts within that temperature range. So what you get is no more the bits and pieces, but it's polymer modification that will make our road better. And plastic is not just one, it's not just the only material that can do that. There are several recycled products that can achieve the same things. This is a road we built in March in Melbourne, and I just wanted to show you that it can be done as for any type of other road construction. You don't need to make the industry change their practices. You can see there, that's the surface. You can't see the colors, you can't see anything. It's all black anyway, and plastic is all melted down. The idea here, I'm not sure whether you can see it because there are the chairs in front of you, but you can use up to 7,500 kilos of recycled plastics per kilometer of road. So if you're thinking about 100 kilometers, that's close to 1 million kilos of plastics that you can reuse in roads. The phase 2 of this project, which phase 1 was just an exploratory study, it's actually to build the road using recycled plastics in Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea. And we just started this, but there is already a lot of interest. So the idea will be to select 2 local areas within Port Moresby. We have already highlighted their 2 suburbs, NCC and Borocco, which are both in Port Moresby. We talked to the NCDC, which is the local council managing the city, and we will be providing those 2 suburbs with 2 different bins. Right now, they only use one, which is the general waste bin. They put everything into the same bin. We're going to provide them with a second bin and a flyer telling them what type of plastic they need to throw away through that bin. Then there's going to be a collection of that particular second bin in those 2 suburbs. And this will be baled after collection and shipped to a recycling facility. As I said, the recycling rate of plastic in Papua New Guinea is close to 0, so there are no recycling facilities for plastic. So for this particular project, we will be sending this to Australia, where it will be converted into plastic pellets and then brought it back to Papua New Guinea. So the idea was to demonstrate the technology, demonstrate that it's feasible, and then in the future, and actually the industry, the local industry has already started conversations to buy their own recycling plastic facilities, which is amazing. And then that will be converted into this sort of construction aggregates or pellets for asphalt modifications. This is another video of another road being built in March in Melbourne. We built several roads like this, and the performance that you can get out of it, it's what's identified in those bullet points there, which is basically greater performance at higher temperature, especially in places where it's very hot, like PNG. Having materials that doesn't soften as soon as it gets a bit warmer, it's definitely a plus. And that's why we were thinking of this as a climate adaptation strategy, a way of reacting to increasing temperatures. Reduce maintenance, because compared to standard asphalt that is not modified with polymers, and as I said to you, I don't look at that as waste plastic, I look at that as a polymer, as an enhancer. You can reduce maintenance, so you have less cost over time. And part of the green procurement practices, or part of the practices in the toolkit, is also use of recycled materials, which is what we're doing. We're taking waste, modifying it, and bring it back to a resource. And this is just the very final video of a recycling plastic facility. There are several of them, and recently one of them has been installed in Tonga. They collect plastics from the river, but also from dump field, from everywhere. Plastic gets sorted and it's being converted into this type of material, which is then crushed into aggregates, construction aggregates. And then this can be reused to build roads, but also to fabricate pavers and walls for housings. That's what we're doing now with the PNG plastics. As I said, this is part of the toolkit. It could be one of the strategies that you can implement for creating green roads. And at the end, I just wanted to conclude with these slides, saying that if you actually take a waste and convert that into something useful, into a resource, you're just not creating better roads, but you're also tackling climate change adaptation, because your roads will be resisting better to higher temperature, for instance. You install a culture of waste management in these particular countries, and you can do something for what they call now the blue economy, avoiding that all that plastic waste ends up in the oceans and rivers and landfill. And that's it. Thank you for listening.
Thanks a lot, Filippo. I think it's an excellent example where the road serves a much bigger agenda and is an instrument for change. The next person I would like to invite is Agnes. Agnes Montangero, yeah? I always call her Agnes, actually. And Agnes is with HealthTAS. She's leading the Rural Infrastructure Unit. She's an engineer by background, and for the last 20 years she's been working on infrastructure for poor people, providing last mile access and creating partnerships. So Agnes.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. You may wonder what this young man, Mohan, is doing here on the picture. Well, simply he is going to school. That's his journey to school. We've heard already earlier this week about Apple the App Adventurous Journey to School. So there are many children in rural areas of Asia and the Pacific who are in this situation. So you can imagine his village is on that side of the river, and the school, the road is on the other side. And what we observe in the countries where we work is that those areas which are not connected, like the village of Mohan, overlap with pockets of poverty. And that's not surprising. If they cannot connect to schools, hospitals, markets, how could they develop a business, or how could they develop their livelihood? So those people are basically left behind, trapped in poverty. And if you look at the figure, and if you look at the progress in terms of rural access, you'll see that we are not going to achieve universal access by 2030. So what can we do? What can we do? According to Sustainable Mobility for All, it would cost $100 per person to achieve universal access by using higher volume rural roads, but only $5 to $10 using basic access and motorcycle trails, only $5 to $10. So it's a huge difference, and $5 to $10 is not much. So at that level of cost, it might be feasible to approach universal access by 2030, but it would mean really reshifting attention, reshifting resources towards basic access. There are countries that made remarkable progress in terms of basic access, and Nepal is one of them. There are some people from Nepal here in the room. Nepal celebrated the construction of its 10,000th trail bridge last year. So that's really amazing. I just would like to explain what we mean with trail bridges, because there are different definition. You may all imagine something different. So what we mean is that kind of structure. So that's one example of a Nepali trail bridge. So it's basically a light structure. It's made of galvanized steel cables and steel deck elements. So there is no wood. It's a very durable structure. They are constructed to last for 50 years, but they are way cheaper than concrete road bridges. And they're basically made for pedestrian motorcycles or three-wheelers or animals to cross with or without load. So basically this kind of structure, if you imagine that you have settlements, isolated settlements on one side of the river and the road network, perhaps an existing road network on the other side, it adds a lot of value to your road network. Oh, now you took out my logo. So the trail bridge is one of the practices of the Green Roads Toolkit under the inclusive growth dimension. Okay, today in Nepal, 1 million people are using trail bridges daily. And the impact, the socioeconomic impact is considerable. Recent impact study confirmed the socioeconomic impact in terms of reducing travel time, increasing school attendance, but also the economic benefit has been demonstrated. In Nepal, for example, they estimated that the payback period for a trail bridge is around 4 years. So the costs are really low. But for me personally, beyond this scale, beyond the impact, what impressed me most personally is this transition from a pilot to a fully government-owned program. So for me, it's an incredible story. It started with 2 pilot bridges 50 years ago, and today there are policies and institutions in place. Today there is no external funding anymore. Today there is no external technical assistance anymore. So we had a technical assistance mandate to the government of Nepal, which was financed by the Swiss government, and this technical assistance mandate phased out earlier this year. So today the sector is really independent, both in terms of funding and in terms of expertise, and I think that's quite unique. And for me personally, I've been really curious to understand what is the secret to this successful transition. So I tried to find out, and I'd like to share with you some of the elements I could find. So first of all, one key element is that the government of Nepal decided to prioritize the trail bridge sector already early on, like in the 1960s. And I asked some of the government officials I could meet who are now retired but who were active at that time, like I asked, but what was your motivation to prioritize the trail bridge sector? And they told me look, it's simple. We realized that without ensuring accessibility for our people, there would be no development for the country. So for them, it was crystal clear. That was fundamental for development. At the beginning, like in the 1960s, the central government was in charge of trail bridge building, but the output was rather low. They constructed like perhaps 50 bridges per year. And at that time, they already realized the demand is huge. They would need to build thousands and thousands of bridges. And with those 50 per year, they would never meet the demand. So at that time, the government decided to decentralize the sector. So they entrusted the local government the responsibility for local bridge building. And additionally, what they did is that they tried to simplify the technology to really build as much as possible on local skills and local materials. So with this, the community approach started. So it was really like users group who were in charge of planning, constructing and maintaining the bridges. So this, of course, was very important for ownership, but also for increasing the construction of bridges. So at that time, the construction increased from less than 50 to about 150 bridges per year. That was around 2000. In 2006, national trail bridge strategy was adopted by the government. And that was a key milestone. So in this strategy, there was a target. So the strategy says every citizen in Nepal should be able to reach public services in less than 1 hour. So that reflects the government commitment, but that's also an obligation for the government to put resources to construct more bridges. So that was a key element to further accelerate the construction of trail bridges. At that time, also standards and manuals were developed, not only technical manuals, but also social manuals, maintenance manuals. Trail bridge know-how was integrated in the education programs of technical colleges and universities. And this was also crucial because it enabled to build a pool of skilled technicians and engineers, which was needed to scale up the system. At that time, also, information systems were developed. Like, for example, there is a web-based trail bridge record system where you can find the bridge condition and maintenance needs, which was also crucial to support data management for such a large-scale system. So, in short, to summarize, we found that there were 6 key elements to transition to this fully government-owned program: the strong and sustained government commitment, decentralization, simplification of technology, the strategy with the target, institutionalized capacity building, and those information system. So just the last one to finalize. So we will ask, what next? We created a South Cooperation Center. It's based in Nepal, and the idea is to share lessons from Nepal with other interested countries. So the center has worked in around 10 countries so far, and I'm very proud that we have the director of our center here with Anshu, and she'll be able to answer all your questions. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a really inspiring story. Maybe Ansu, you can stand up so people know whom to go to, yeah? And big hand for Helvetas. And I think also, you know, this is really touching, you know, the importance of this last mile access, but also what I really like in Agnes' story is the importance of all these enabling factors. It's not just the practice, it's also the enabling factors that sort of make it go to scale. And that's also really part of the toolkit. As a third speaker, I would like to invite Koen van Bakel. Koen is with the Rebel Group, and Koen is a financial strategy advisor with the Rebel Group. The Rebel Group does a lot of work on e-mobility, innovations also in new modes of transport, innovations both technical but also financial and organizational with new private partnerships. So Koen will explain us about an initiative called Dig Once, and he will do the rest of the story.
All right. Thank you very much. Comes just about high enough. That works for me. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here with you. And I've got a couple of minutes to talk through this concept, Dig Once policies and methods. And quite fortunately, it's in fact a very straightforward and intuitive concept. So I think I can pretty much cover everything that I need to do within the next couple of minutes that is available to me. Subject to the slide changer obviously working. Points at the back of the room. Yes, it does. Perfect. So Dig Once is very intuitive and basic because it essentially means including in road design and road construction, or if you will, major overhaul, any elements that you anticipate that are going to be required not only today and in the foreseeable 1 or 2 years future, but over the longer term. And it is therefore a very logical and common sense concept that gets applied a lot in road design and road engineering. And this concept, as it is here and as it has been included in the Green Roads Toolkit, builds on the development by ADB of another toolkit, which is essentially all about taking that concept and applying it to decarbonization of road transport, which is of course all about the Paris alignment of infrastructure and road projects, and therefore highly relevant, I think, also to today's event and to this discussion. And so in that definition, again, Dig Once is defined as integrating all those elements into road infrastructure development, and thereby achieving a more sustainable way of developing and implementing roads, because after all, we don't have to open up the infrastructure again years after we've built it, but we can anticipate and bring things forward and include what needs to be included from the get-go. And thereby it also lowers the hurdle to include such element as can be required for road transport decarbonization, because it adds extra cost efficiency if done well. And that concerns, on top of the main road infrastructure, putting additional systems related to energy transmission, to the requirements for high-powered fast charging of electric vehicles. It can pertain to the sort of spatial reservations for off-grid solar charging within the right-of-way of the roads. I mean, of course, solar power generation, and all the kind of systems and services that come into play when you start to think about these things. It is a straightforward business case, therefore, that involves, in the design and preparation process, a couple of pairs of brains applying common sense and potentially a small business case to what the pros and cons might be of including different elements. But basically, it looks a little bit like this. It is about reducing development costs. It is about kind of bringing in these other elements that, that in the end, if you look at the overall scope of what gets built, reduces the cost of developing and building that scope by not building it twice, but building it all in one go. And of course, the downside of doing that is that for some time, possibly, you're going to have some overcapacity or some underutilized or some non-utilized pieces of infrastructure. And of course, putting in extra elements into the design and into the O&M scope of a road project or road infrastructure means a bit of extra risk because you introduce more interface and more complexity. If the balance of that little business case is positive, we've achieved a lower hurdle for including such items that can be relevant for transport decarbonization and for greener roads. And the way that that's been done in the past and up to date within policy frameworks or on a product-by-product basis is, especially in the last couple of years, especially in the region here also, with regards to the realization of optical fiber cables. So very much focused on the telecommunications sector. The case of fiber optic cables being developed along the network of the Bangladesh railways. A very good example is the ADB project related to the development of BRT in Karachi, where OFC ducts were included in the infrastructure design from almost day one. And there's multi-utility tunnels in China and a lot of other best practice examples that are being highlighted in the separate toolkit. An example close to my heart and close to my home is the ongoing realization of a road extension in the Netherlands, which, for example, concerns zero-emission construction equipment, energy-neutral tunnel systems, as well as, again, within the road corridor, maximal use for off-grid generation of solar power. And indeed, the toolkit includes the potential application of a DIG-1's case for intercity motorway charging in Bangladesh. So that toolkit specifically on DIG-1's approaches hopefully will come out in a couple of months through the regular ADB publication channels. And then it will be there for everybody to consult. What it does is setting out the sort of very definition and the thinking about the business case on DIG-1's. It kind of sets out how you could think about and look at existing policies and integrate and embedding of DIG-1's approaches and strategies in those policies. And it kind of gets you to a framework where you can think about how do we action this in our day-to-day program and project planning and implementation, and how do we shape this phenomenal and very straightforward, intuitive thought into the complexity that is infrastructure development by governments on a day-to-day basis. And it does that with many things. One of the items that the toolkit provides a little bit more insights to are kind of the business models on top of the implementation and business model of an existing road project through EPC or some form of public-private partnership. It starts to pick and unpick scope and risk with concern to spatial reservations, certain systems related to energy transmission and charging and the services around that, and really kind of scope out what can be done and into what kind of implementation model and contracts can this DIG-1's process be integrated. Further, some of the main takeaways after that when it comes to getting it done and implementing it are to really challenge the private sector in the tender and contracting process already and kind of set out the challenge and say, look, we have certain sustainability targets to achieve here. What kind of proposals do you have, be it polymer-based pavement or others, to achieve that? Secondly, if there is a separation of scope for these specific DIG-1's components, for example, energy transmission and solar generation, or even the EV charging, bring that a bit forward so that your partners in the private sector that end up getting a concession or some kind of piece of work for that are already there to help you optimize and finalize road design so that the road is designed taking into account and being sort of compliant with the requirements of these other elements that are being integrated by digging once. That's not easy because it usually spans across multiple sectors of government, from road to energy to renewables, and so early onboarding of different stakeholders in government is essential. And again, the toolkit offers a couple of handles and points of entry for that, and even indeed for the very practical aspects such as centralizing with those different stakeholders, permitting processes, making sure that the relevant parts of the road program or road projects are coordinated on a day-to-day basis between project teams and project owners, and the mapping of the resulting overground and underground assets that are being built by digging once. And I hope in those couple of minutes that were available to me today, I've dug into the topic well enough, and I thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Koen. I think this is really an excellent example also on having to work together between different sectors, the road sector working together with other sectors. And I think that's really also very much in so many of the practices in green roads. So thanks a lot for this. Also, you saved some time. I want to ask now Elko Cox. Elko has been doing really fascinating work on modeling the climate risks, but also increasingly opportunities for the road network. Elko is an associate professor at Free University in the Department of Climate Risks. And the floor is yours, Elko.
All right, thanks, Frank, and thanks again for giving me the opportunity to present some of the work, ongoing work that we're doing, particularly on climate adaptation for infrastructure systems. And then here I'll focus on transport systems and also keep this multi-hazard component in mind, a little bit as I touched upon on Tuesday as well already. I'm not the tall Dutch guy, yes, Koen, so I'll take it down a bit. All right, so some of you have seen this figure already, of course, on Tuesday. So the idea is to really build upon this and then move into adaptation, modeling, and strategy development. So just for the few that have not been there, just quickly walk you through it. So of course, when we do a climate risk assessment, we generally always start with the hazard data, which is generally, especially when we go to climate adaptation, is essential because, well, you don't really know what to adapt if you also don't know the climate setting. When we preferably also spatially explicit information. So what we generally do is we take that spatially explicit climate information, we overlay it with the spatially explicit information of the transportation system, airports, roads, railway, dry bulk, pretty much everything that we know. And of course, we see what are the potential exposure and risk of those climate extremes to the transport system. Using that, we want to stress test the network because, of course, transportation systems are highly complex and highly interconnected. So disruption or failure of one asset, of course, has strong impacts on the functioning of the network. So what is the impact of accessibility to schools, hospitals, access to ports, airports, but also accessibility to local communities, and what are then the economic impacts? So that's generally the last step where we try to take this asset level part, the network criticality part, and turn that all into metrics to be used in, for example, cost-benefit approaches. So here now comes the new part, where we try to use this to then develop adaptation strategies. And I think what we really want to build upon is that generally the focus used to be mainly on reducing the hazard or reducing the impact on the asset, so asset level adaptation plans. But of course, you can also think beyond that. We can also think about network level impacts or network level adaptation strategies, or even system-wide adaptation strategies, which link also a bit more strongly to transformative adaptation, which I will touch upon also in a minute. So think a little bit more concretely. So let's take this framework again of this hazard, asset, network, and more system level impacts. Then of course we can think about implementation, different types of adaptation strategies in different levels of our modeling exercise. I'm a modeler, so I always like to think on where in my model should I implement these things to actually make this technically feasible. So for example, of course, traditionally we could think about reducing the hazard footprint. So think of course about reducing the impact of the flood, reduce the impact of the landslide. But we can of course also reduce the impact on the asset by reducing the vulnerability to that asset. So playing around with the vulnerability of those assets also in our modeling framework. Or we can think about moving, of course, this asset. There are examples, of course, that we take the road out of the floodplain, for example, to make sure it's not inundated anymore when there again are high waters. Or we can think about the more network level strategy. So really think about, can we increase the redundancy of the network? What are the impacts on the connections within the network? Are there specific roads that are highly vulnerable? Should we add redundancy so schools or communities remain to be accessible? Or do we need to think about improving the capacity of certain links? Is that maybe a better strategy, that there are certain links that are highly important? Should we ensure that they have redundant capacity to always make sure that they remain to be functioning? Or what's also a bit more my background, do we need to think more about the system level approaches? So do we need to think about how supply chains work? Or should supply chains maybe think differently on how they use the transportation systems? Or more from a government level, should we ensure we have the right recovery means to make sure we are back on track quickly? And I think a nice example of that was by Akito's presentation on Tuesday from the Japanese embassy, showing how they rebuild a road in 6 days, which of course was extremely impressive. And but you need a lot of preparation and money to be able to pull that off, of course. So make this even a bit more practical, given the time, just slowly touching upon a few of them. So, for example, when we think about asset level approaches, we can of course think about elevating embankments of the railways, add additional culverts to a road, traditional approaches that of course are also fully available within the Green Roads Toolkit. But especially on a system level, going back to the system level approach again, I think there it's interesting to also think about how companies can become more redundant or more resilient to disruptions in the transportation system. Because we know that many companies pretty much work in a bit of a just-in-time principle, so they have limited inventory. They just assume every day there's a new inventory coming in, being shipped by them, because it's costly to have stocks, to have an inventory. But of course, if there's a disruption 3 times a year in your transportation network, then maybe it actually becomes economically interesting or financially interesting then to keep a little bit of stock. So it's always good to think a little bit out of the box when we try to think about adaptation strategies along the way. So then just touching a little bit on some of these adaptation strategies for different hazards. I mean, floods, most people can always come up with some ways to reduce the impact of a flood. But particularly when we think about droughts, it tends to be already a bit more complex. What type of drought are we dealing with? Is it upstream? Is it in the area? What type of ground often? So if we think about roads being built on peat soils or clay soils, of course, when there's a long-term drought, peat can start to subside, clay can start to crack, which of course in the long term can really impact your road. So can we do something about reducing the impact of a drought? Or when we think about wildfires, can we consider fire breaks? Or when we think about heat waves, can we make sure that the railway is continuous welded? Or the roads have higher temperature specifications? And maybe temperature specifications that are good now are fine, but if we see that in 2050 the number of hot days are doubling, then of course we may already want to think right now on making sure our road remains climate resilient in the future as well. So how do we then go about comparing all these different strategies and adaptation options? And I don't have too much time to really go into super detail in this approach, but one approach which is more and more being adopted, which has already been developed, I think around 15 to 20 years ago by Marjolein Haasnet at Deltares and colleagues, is this concept of adaptation pathways. And within adaptation pathways, what you're trying to do is you want to compare different options and how they perform over time. And what particularly is interesting is to see which options until what time in the future, given certain climate conditions, remain still realistic and feasible, and at what stage in time can you still switch to a different adaptation strategy, and when are you potentially locked in because either the climate has changed too much or you've invested so much in a certain strategy already that it's too costly to still change the way you've designed your road or railway to change, and then your impacts may increase. So this scorecard approach is really a convenient way to take different types of adaptation strategies. You can take different types of climate scenarios and try to assess until when, under which scenarios, should I use which climate adaptation strategy. And this is particularly useful if you want to compare more incremental adaptation approaches. So let's say you make sure that culverts remain up to date, that you, whenever you do maintenance, you make sure the culverts are clean again. If possible, you may widen them a little bit to make sure they're up to the standards again, because perhaps weather extremes have become more intense in the future. So an extreme rainfall event with a probability of 1 in 10 may suddenly have a probability of once every 5 years in 30 years time, because the climate has become more extreme. So that, of course, are generally being considered incremental changes. But we may also want to start thinking about more transformative adaptation approaches, so where we really start redesigning and rethinking on how we're actually using the system. So generally it's a bit more complex, requires more time to think about, and generally, but over the long run, this can be more cost efficient. So to highlight a little bit this transformational versus incremental adaptation, So again, what we generally see, the incremental adaptation is, for example, you build the dike, remain to maintain the dike, and that's a bit of the classic approach. But with a transformational adaptation, you really want to consider, again, how are you using the system, and can you think of different ways of configuring or using the system? So where are now the opportunities of academia meeting also practitioners? So as you already figured out, it was quite high level, also given the time, but also because there's still many unknowns and what are actually the best working adaptation strategies on all these different levels? What are the costs? But what's also important, if we consider this multi-hazard concept, there could be specific adaptation strategies that work very well for flooding. For example, you raise the embankment of the road, so it's of course less prone to being flooded. But if that embankment cannot handle an earthquake, then you still may have assynergies and maladaptation. So that's why this multi-hazard concept is quite essential to take into account when you develop your adaptation strategies. And then finally, another difficulty is really assessing the cost then of those adaptation options. And this is where we really need to have a conversation on what would it cost for you to actually implement certain adaptation strategies, because that is the only way that we can really model then also whether it's cost efficient or not to actually implement these type of measures. My time is up, and here's my end. So thank you. And
Yeah, Elko, thanks a lot. I think it's also a good example that we sometimes need to take a little bit of a step back, looking in the future or looking at the larger landscape perspective to select the best practices. And this is also very much, the toolkit generates these practices, but then we need to sort of discuss what fits well within the different constraints and the priorities of time. We would like to start a panel discussion, and some people have already asked some questions by Event Air. Yeah, if you have a question, please use Event Air if you know how to use it. Yeah, to ask a question. I will read it from this iPad. Gordon is also there to be asked. I would like to take 10-15 minutes maximum. Otherwise, the break is overdue. So if you have any questions in Event Air, maybe I'll start first with the questions which are there, but please, you know, source some questions, yeah? And you can also use the analog Event Air in the end, yeah? Which is by the hand, but let's first look at these questions and then I'll sort of ask the floor. So one question from Engineer Prakash is, what are, and that I think is to you, Filippo, yeah? What are the various practices, yeah, to collect waste plastic for recycling, yeah? And what % of bitumen reduction is achieved by using recycled plastic?
Okay, I got the second part of the question. I missed the first one. Sorry, Frank.
Well, how do you collect? How do you already showed some of the collection methods, but how do you collect the different plastics that can serve as a source material?
Yeah. We don't actually collect specific sources. We collect all the recycled plastic, all the waste plastic that is there, and this waste plastic is being sorted. So there are machines that can separate different polymers and different waste streams according to what your need finally is. I would say there are two types of waste plastics. One that comes from post-consumer, from our households, and that's the most problematic because it includes a little bit of everything. There is also another stream of waste plastic, which is post-industrial waste plastic, basically going to a plastic company. They also have waste out at the end of their production chain, and you get that, and that is very quality controlled, whole homogeneous in terms of the type of polymers you're using. So to give an answer on how do we collect the plastic that we need, we do not specify one type or another. They collect everything, and that this is being sorted via specific machines which are called separators. There are several technologies. This is actually one of the bottlenecks of the entire process because this is quite expensive technology, especially if you're looking at infrared and things like that. it becomes expensive. That's why in the last video that company, it's collecting everything and has developed a technology to avoid separation to produce that granulate type of plastic aggregate that is then used in construction. That's why we're pushing for that technology for developing countries, because it avoids the need to separate plastics.
And how much bitumen is reduced?
Well, that's I don't really like to talk about bitumen reduction. I would, and then probably the follow-up of the question was, if we do not reduce bitumen, then the product will cost more. So my thinking of that is because the plastic is used as a polymer, and usually this plastic polymer increases the stiffness of the asphalt layers, we can actually reduce the thickness of the asphalt layers rather than taking out bitumen. I would like the bitumen to stay there, and some technologies, some commercially available technologies that use recycled plastics are promoting it as a bitumen extender, meaning that you add the plastic, you take out the bitumen to make it economically viable. I would personally like the bitumen to stay there, and I would like to maybe reduce the thickness. If you think about reducing 20% of the thickness from 5 centimeters to 4, just by adding 1% of plastic, that's a lot of economic savings.
Excellent. There was one more question to you, Filippo.
Yeah.
It relates a bit to the first question. Is basically, when is the business case there for the recycling? Some countries might not, produce enough demand for recycled material, for instance.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and that was one of the issues that we had in Australia at the very beginning. There were a lot of government-funded plastic recyclers and recycling facilities, but then we missed the end product, the market for the end product. So a lot of people were taking the plastic, separating, shredding, and creating these small pellets, but then they could not sell it because there were not enough end products that would use recycled plastics. And now we became quite good at that because there was a change in the specification that actually allowed road constructions to use, or people building housing, that allowed them to use recycled plastic in their construction. So there needs to be a change in the specifications. Otherwise, it's going to be tough for a recycler to make it economically viable because they can't sell it after being recycled.
So excellent. So the roads need the recycler, and the recycler needs the roads.
Yeah.
Yeah. Please. Yeah.
I'm Michael Aluna, the Philippines. I'm a clean air advocate and into transport co-ops. Anyway, given the vast difference between the ideal plans, ideal programs, everything ideal, and the stark reality, how do you strike a balance between the situation where, which I've heard from Elko Cox, that on the one extreme, you have the business who want to be cost efficient. They go for the just-in-time management to reduce inventory levels to be more efficient, competitive. But on the other extreme, I hear it often in this conference, the need for redundancy to be resilient. So you need backup plans. You need some inventory because disaster can happen anytime. So those are two extremes, and they entail costs on the other extreme, savings on costs on the other extreme. So how do you strike that balance, and what are the guideposts, should we say, in like taking from this Green Roads Toolkit? Because perhaps it may vary from case to case, country to country, sector per sector, industry by industry. Anyway, just a general perhaps how to.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, how do you strike the balance, and maybe also how do you make the system striking the balance? Yeah?
Yeah.
So maybe for Elko and maybe also for Gordon.
Thanks for this really good question, and also highlighting the complexity indeed of implementation. So what I see here, I think another level of complexity that I wasn't able to mention too much is indeed when you think about implementing the cost of adaptation, who benefits and who's going to pay. And there's indeed also another complexity. And actually at the moment, so I'm also leading a large European project on this, and we are actually dealing with exactly that element, like who will in the end pay for these adaptation strategies and who will benefit, and is that in line or not, and how do you deal with that? But maybe so one thing that's often being said, the only way to truly create awareness is when people experience a disaster, which is always a bit of an awkward thing. But yeah, probably to convince companies to we need perhaps add more inventories, add more stock is probably once they start experiencing delays and disruptions in their supplies. And I can only more talk about the European experiences, but so when the Suez Canal was blocked, was it 2 years ago, 1 year ago?
1 year ago.
And there we, even like the bike shop suddenly had no bikes anymore, and the garden center could not supply certain random stuff. And then suddenly local companies started to realize how dependent they are indeed on things happening far away. And that did start a bit of a discussion among them. I'm not sure if they in the end implemented something, probably because 3 months later, everything was back to normal and people didn't care anymore. But at least it did spark a bit of a conversation. Oh, how should we maybe also have something here at home to keep things going? Yeah, so I don't have a best practice answer. I just can acknowledge the complexity, and I'm happy to talk about it and how we can help as academics or researchers to convey the message rightly to convince them to be prepared.
Okay, and I think on that question, my perspective is somewhat different. I think if you go back, what agencies and road management people really need to kind of be thinking about is what would be like vulnerability assessment. You know, you're having to go back and look at your system, where are the weak points in the system, and thinking about that question about you know, redundancy and like alternate roads. I think if you look at what you've got in your road system, you may decide, okay, you've got a vulnerable bridge, which is your probably weak link in your road system. If you have if you don't have, if that's an extremely expensive structure to retrofit or solve scour problems, and you have an alternate route, then the cheaper way out may be, you know, keeping in mind that alternate route and not doing anything about the bridge. If it's reasonably easy to you know, retrofit or do something to make the bridge less vulnerable, then you'd take that approach, and you wouldn't need some sort of an alternate route. So this, you know, the vulnerability assessment is just a way to look at your road system, and it depends on, you know, you need good asset management so you know what you have out there and decide where are the weak links, and that needs to be your priority. And you know, you can't say any one particular asset out there is the most important. You have to, you know, look at them all and decide what are the weak links and where to prioritize your risks.
Okay, so basically what you're saying, all the green roads things is not just a luxury. It can sometimes even save money by doing things more clever. Another question? Yeah. Please.
Also for Senora Giustotti. My first question is the specification available for the asphalt road design, for the thickness, for the 1% or the 10%? Is it something that we can get from you or access somewhere online? Second of all, in the Philippines, we've moved away from flexible pavements to rigid pavements, but we still use asphalt as a overlay. That's not very thick. Even so, when you say you still want the bitumen there, given that there's so much less on an overlay compared to an actual asphalt pavement, is there still space for the alternative material?
First question about the specifications. Yes, they are available online, and the reason why I presented this today is because in 2020 the Australian government funded my university a substantial amount of money to investigate the use of recycled plastics in roads. So we conducted about two years and a half of experiments in the lab, and we supplied plastics from all over Australia and New Zealand. And there are 4 test methods being developed and a national specification. I can share it with you later. That's not an issue. In terms of your question about concrete pavements and overlaying them with asphalt, yes, it still makes sense to use it. I wouldn't probably use recycled plastics for that particular application, and the main reason is because, as I said, recycled plastics will make your asphalt stiffer, and when you put something on top of concrete, you have a huge problem of reflective cracking at the joints going all the way up to the surface. So I would be using something which is much more flexible. And there are other recycled materials that you can use, like crumb rubber from end-of-life tires, for instance,
Right.
which can serve the purpose. But the final video that showed the construction aggregates being fabricated by waste plastic, that can be used also in your concrete slabs if you want to.
Now,
Okay, can I ask, because I think we don't have much time, maybe you can use the break, yeah, because you are really sort of on a special level, I can see that, yeah. There was another question actually in the app, and that question is to Agnes on the inclusive growth and the last mile access. And the question to Agnes is, from your experience, yeah, what can international development partners, including the ADB, do to make sure that this last mile connectivity stays on the agenda and sort of happens? Yep.
Okay. I think we would like to have answers from you on this, because it's really, I mean, the limited attention to last mile connectivity is really our challenge. But I think, I mean, one element, the first element to start with is raising awareness. So we have figures on impact, we have figures on cost benefit, so it's the starting point. Another thing is, like, how can we create incentives to invest more in last mile connectivity? And one thing we were discussing, I think briefly with Jan and Michael, was should we perhaps shift indicators, like the Rural Access Index doesn't seem to be an incentive to invest more in last mile connectivity. But for example, if your target would be to increase school attendance, and if you have a certain budget for a road project, I think it will be an incentive to connect as many people as possible who are in the area of that road. So also including motorcycle trails, bridges. So I think that could be an area, like shifting indicators could be an area that I think ADB or other donors could push or could, yeah.
Okay, no, I think that's a really good point. And I think you made something at least that has stuck in my head, that this last mile access with certain technologies actually is very cheap. Yeah, it's not so costly. So I think it's maybe the sort of thing you're talking. There's still one more question from the event air, and that's for Koen, and it relates a little bit to what was raised issue on this foresight. Yeah, you know, also for Dick once. Yeah, what is the role of the private sector and what is the role of the public sector to, you know, make sure this sort of slightly longer term perspective is safeguarded, which, you know, pays off in the long run, but on the short run it might have a cost.
Yes, I think I understand the question, because of course a toolkit that's presented at an ADB event to DMCs suggests a very public sector oriented approach. And in fact, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. So in the end, when it comes to decarbonization of road infrastructure, there are things at the discretion of the private sector to do anyway, depending a bit on how roads are organized. You can build surface areas, you can include, without any public sector involvement or without much of it, EV charging in those surface areas. So there are degrees of freedom where that can happen. On the other hand, roads are mostly regulated, design standards are regulated. Often they're putting contracts for maintenance or for integrated development and O&M. So What also makes sense is a lot of engagement at a system level between what is possible and what can be done by government. And you see that public-private engagement in a lot of discussions, even at this event about furthering the adoption of EV and what is necessary. And then you see often that the countries where it's been done successful, Thailand being one example in the region here that was even mentioned this morning, is there is this national level, system level dialogue about what needs to get done. And that even translates into, I guess, the next point, the final point, because I see the timer flashing, which is at the transactional level, whether that is contracting for an operation, and for a maintenance contract, I mean, or for an integrated PPP, a dialogue with the private sector, but also creating space and budget for saying, guys, we want to achieve a certain decarbonization goal or a certain sustainability goal. We have a budget that we set aside in this project and this contract, but we need you to provide us with the best solution, and we're going to select the bidder, the winning bidder in this process, among other things, based on your best proposal for this. So integrating that into your kind of routine tender and contracting process is another way to do that, where the twain shall meet, public and private sector.
Yeah, wonderful. Again, I think it's the enabling framework that you say, the contracting procedure that can trigger this. I want to give a big hand to all the 5 speakers. I think they at least enlightened me and inspired me. And the light is flashing. That means that the coffee and the break is waiting for you. And come back at 4. The practical part, yeah? Good. Otherwise, you might not have a seat. Yeah.
That was great. Everyone, that was really good. Fantastic presentations. So we need to rewrite the oral access completely. That's the answer. Because I saw the screenshot of everything. It's there.
It's not touched. I emailed this to you. Oh, I need to enter the Zoom really.
This technology is like, I think it's so well organized that in the end there are more technical problems than just doing it simple. The slides for Maggie were not there. But yeah.
Sorry? Not hear anything, that's the purpose.
So the idea is that we just put there and then they have to accept.
Well, they can just flick screen. Yeah? Is it clear, Frank, from the back? No? Yeah, yeah, dan kan je
Because
then you
you
can see it
also
sort of.
a bit of the filters and the results.
Will we even use these chairs still?
I think not, so we can just.
We're not paneling anymore. One special person.
Okay, so then I would tell you. No, it is very easy. And
My question that you didn't ask is that how much is in like a back design process in it to supply roads and schemes? How much? So I want to understand this. Is there a model that we can study for feasibility? It's a good idea, for sure. Right. Yes. There's a lot of research going on using recycled plastic for concrete. A lot of stuff funded by government science. So my only complaint is that the industry for food processing doesn't exist. So that's the main bottleneck. Yeah.
From an academic perspective.
Yes, I'm talking, yeah, in the road space.
Because I think it narrows it further.
Because Ian, he made some.
Let me untick this, right? I don't care about these filters right now. Now it's 45. So say I want to see CO2 and disaster resilience. Share goes down. So this is I at the same time, you might want to see two things. So this is filtering, this is not. So you know what we should have done now that I'm thinking about it? Yeah, because at the moment we've only got it to filter, which means if you want to see two different themes, you have to make sure to untick the other one, unless you want things that do two things at the same time, which is what it's showing you now. So I'll explain that. At the moment, yeah.
But here we have to combine.
Yeah, but some people might want to see the ones that do CO2 right? So I'll explain the exact way that that's how it's working at the moment. ultimately we should to ChatGPT, show me the tools that do this and this, or show me the tools for both of these things, right? And then it will return a value. So ultimately, I hope and then we don't need to worry about Excel functions, right? So, but for right now, I ticked everything right now. Well, we're not using those today anyway, so it doesn't matter. Why that's happening. But anyway, for the exercise, let's bring everyone back in. Probably a good idea. Yeah, no. Facilitators, go sit at your respective tables now. So I'll just make up one. On my made up exercise, I have that's not what it is. So I'll do mountainous low voltage. Yep. Okay. So am I doing this first? Sorry. This is not first, right? Or I can do this first. Is that easier for you if I do this first? Because the presentation from ATO is first. I think I need to do it with, it needs to happen on the same slide as the introduction. So, we need to get everyone back.
I cut my slides, but I realized that we're running out of time. All goods, ma'am.
All right, in the interest of time, we're just going to get started. So if you could please sit back down at the tables. Please make sure you are at the tables because we're going to be moving into group exercises. So if you're seated at the back, please move on to a table seat if there is one available, which there is. Okay. So to make sure everyone is alive after the coffee break, we're going to have an icebreaker. So I would like to introduce Anshu, who's going to run us through a group activity.
Hello, good afternoon. Do I have your attention? Okay, great. So at the end of the day, it's good to have an icebreaker because I'm sure we're all very tired just absorbing so much information together. So normally what I would request you to do is to stand up and maybe move to an open space, but that's not possible here right now. So we'll just adapt a bit. So the exercises as such. This is the Powerball. Okay, let's say this is it. I will throw this to somebody. It could be across the room. It could be, the person next door, sitting next to you. What I would like to request you is to first of all say your name, where you're from, and now that we've learned a bit about the Green Roads Toolkit, what is it that you expect from the toolkit, or how do you think it will be used? Okay, I think that's simple enough. So let's start. It would be good to have everybody, have a say with the ball. But since time is a bit limited, I'll request Agnes to just indicate when 3 minutes are up. So, and then we'll end it there. So, okay, so to start off with, namaste. My name is Anshut Tumbahamfe, and I'm from the Helvetas, Nepal, the director of the South-South Cooperation Unit. And our focus is to transfer Trailbridge knowledge from Nepal to other Global South areas. And for me, what is important about the toolkit is that I really hope that it'll provide recognition for the importance of the last mile access. So I'll throw the ball now. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So please don't be shy and pick it up. Okay. There's a mic at the table.
So you do yourself. Okay. My name is Robert Kang. I'm from the Philippines. I'm in the Philippines. And hoping to present what the learnings we have right now on the Green Roads Toolkit in our locality. Okay. Now you throw that. Someone grab it.
Anyway, my name is Andrew Osman. I'm from Papua New Guinea. I'm with the Department of Transport. You would have heard my minister speak yesterday. So I'm from his department. But in terms of this, I only came in this second session, but it's interesting. How can we learn from this in terms of the complexities of transportation in any one country, and how we can use the toolkit to help pave the way forward in terms of servicing our people. Thank you.
So then you hold it and throw it across the other side. See if you can nail someone.
So, good afternoon, everyone. I am Katrina from the Philippines. So, for my expectations for the Green Roads Toolkit, so I hope it will be a tool that can be used in our localities, but also flexible to the needs of those underserved communities.
Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Isaac, and I'm from the Pacific Islands in the Federated States of Micronesia. We're actually a country that is influenced by the U.S. government, so we're actually under U.S. influence. And my take on this workshop is we always have a problem with the funding. So I would, as far as economizing and as far as getting ideas on how we can cost savings is what we're actually out for. So with these new initiatives, we would really appreciate to see how we can improve our funding as far as spending is concerned. Thank you.
You give it an arm. I reckon nails. Anyone, give it a throw.
Sorry. Oh. Sorry.
I was hoping the ball will come to me. It has. My name is Prakash Ingole. I am from Maharashtra, India. I worked in the government of Maharashtra Public Works Department, and after superannuation, I am now a consultant working in a consulting firm for highway engineering. It's a very good tool to me, and I am now presently working on a 37 kilometers of national highway project. And I hope to implement whatever I am learning out of this immediately on the project to make it more greener. Thank you so much. Last.
Well, thank you. My name is Michael Rubio. I've been talking all day. Well, my expectations for the Green Roads Toolkit is pretty high. I really hope, to be able to not just an expectation for myself, but to be able to contribute and let more people here who can really use it, use it. Because I believe the actual road designers are not here. So I'll try to help with that. So the right people are also, other important people are also reached by this tool.
So thank you so much for participating. But I also have a sort of call to action, because what do you see here right now? Like, any ideas? So for me, what I see is like a web, interconnectedness amongst all of us. Like, we come from different places, different organization. Our concerns are very different. But at the end of the day, I think since, we all live on Earth, we are all, striving towards a better planet. So let's, utilize this toolkit in order to really move forward, to connect, to reach out and coordinate amongst ourselves. Thank you very much.
You're the winner. All right, thank you everyone. Look, thank you everyone for your active participation in that icebreaker. I'd now like to invite Mr. Alvin, coming to us from the Asian Transport Outlook. You may be familiar already with the ATO website. The ATO has produced a new helpful edition related to green roads. So Alvin's going to introduce that to us now. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would do the presentation in a more expedited manner and not take up the full 10 minutes. But essentially, what we have been trying to do, just indulge us with a couple of slides, but for over the last years, we have been trying to collate, organize, and curate data at different levels, at the national level, at the urban level, at the project level, and now we are also doing policies. And we are now translating these data into information that we think would be very much useful in terms of providing impetus for very, very important discussions towards decision making. One is related to the development of green and greener roads. We have been focusing in terms of collecting data from official sources as well as high quality secondary sources. We are always looking into doing an incremental approach, so trying to expand and upgrade our databases and the tools that we create for people to consume the data and information that are contained in our databases in our website. We are sitting in data that encompasses different dimensions. We look at infrastructure, activity, access and connectivity, air pollution, road safety, climate change, economic impact at different geographical levels, leading into different types of insights and different types of knowledge products as well. And the Green Roads Profiles is one of them. I'd be skipping this one. But essentially, we are also have been upgrading our work in terms of looking at the policies. So right now we have a collection of more than 1,100 policies, and more than 500 of them we have already been doing some detailed analysis, trying to categorize them. And this is the way that we are able to extract those relevant policies that are related to green roads in the different dimensions that have been also been discussed earlier. And these is just a collection of the different sample pages of what you would see in the green roads profiles. And the rationale really is we wanted to contribute towards the demystification of the road sector by consolidating existing multidimensional data information policies that are relevant to the greening of the road sector. It's always very difficult to, again, start from scratch whenever you're dealing with maybe staff changes, or maybe just starting out with the concept of a green roads toolkit or a green roads. And this is something that we offer in the green roads profile. So we consolidate these very core types of information. We ensure that these are trying to address the gaps and the opportunities towards greening the road sector, contribute towards improving the monitoring, the wider goals such as the SDGs Paris Agreement. And we have made it so that the green roads profiles feed and serve as inputs to the utilization of the green roads toolkits. So as much as possible, the information that we have, the data, we've organized it in a way that you can use it in the Green Roads Toolkit, particularly in terms of looking at the priority themes. Later on, you'll see some of the policy side of it. These are things that you can take as an input towards starting the analysis for the Green Roads Toolkit, particularly at the national level. So we have information on general information about the country, for example. We try to combine country statistics as well as benchmarking sort of indicators wherein you can see your country against other countries based on existing data. We also look into various, let's say, temporal sort of monitoring. So for different indicators such as, let's say, road quality and governance effectiveness, looking at how it has evolved within the past decade or so. We have things on the quality of life, fostering inclusive growth, road safety, and then, of course, things on energy, as well as emissions and decarbonization. We have also tried to consolidate data in terms of, let's say, climate resilience, disaster preparedness, pollution, water, land management, among others. And you would see here, these are the sorts of information that you would get. Extraction of specific policies and excerpts from these policies that relate to the road transport sector. And for each of the countries, you would have this based on the different, let's say, existing policy documents. And again, this is a start. It makes the analysis easier to start in this sense. We have other things. I think you've also seen this earlier during the workshop in terms of looking at the specific case studies that had been done in those countries. And you can find these profiles if you go to our website, the asiantransportoutlook.com. Just go to the analytical outputs and click on the ATO Green Roads profiles. I think we have 23 countries already available in the website. And with that, I would like to thank you and the team who have been working so hard on the profiles as well. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, so now I would like to just give you a very quick introduction to the toolkit itself and to show you just a little bit of how it could be used. So today we're going to focus on using the toolkit as if we were project teams designing a project, okay? This is what the toolkit looks like when you open it up. At the moment, it's Excel based. Perhaps with the next iteration, the format might change. But for now, we're using Excel. And for now, if it uses an AND function to enable us to filter results based on a specific theme that we might be interested in, and based on a number of different criteria. Why did that just click? Sorry. Yeah, but I'm not sure why I didn't touch it. Okay, so So I'm just going to take you through an example just to show you how it works. But when we move into the group exercises, each table will be working together on a specific example. So you'll get a chance to use the toolkit in just a moment. So for me, I have a road in a mountainous area. So I'm going to go ahead and tick mountainous. It's a low volume road. And I'm at the design stage, and I'm interested in progressive or, moderate level of impact. And in particular, I want things that are going to show me climate resilience. So up here at the top, the theme that I'm interested in is climate resilience. So I'm going to click that. And you can see that with each thing that I clicked, it narrowed down the number of practices that were visible to my specific interest. So I've now got 17 practices that have been narrowed down for me. And one of those that we're going to look at, so sorry, I should also show you, it will filter on the left-hand side by the green road theme that practice relates to, the specific intervention area, and then the practice name. So now I've got my filtered practices. I'm going to look at the climate resilience theme. I'm going to look at resilient routing and avoiding vulnerable areas. And in particular, I am going to, sorry, I lied to you. I'm going to click on climate resilient road drainage design. And in particular, I'm going to look at climate resilient culvert design. And if I click that, it's going to take me to the details of that particular practice. It's going to give me details around some good practice examples. It's going to show me the main theme with the solid dot along the Green Roads Toolkit that it's addressing, as well as some other themes that it touches upon with the open dot. If we scroll down, it shows us some photos of what this practice is talking about. If we go down further, it tells us the enabling factors that we might need to be in place in order to use this practice. Fear not. Enabling practices, if they're not there, that's something that the project itself can incorporate. And then it's going to discuss the costs and benefits of the practice, and then include some references and links for further information. So if I decide to select this practice, this is where I can go to find out more information. So the toolkit is showing us at a given level an amount of information for practices that we could use. And then we can click on this green button here to go back to project level sheet, which is where we'll be working today. So as I mentioned, at each table, we're going to have a chance to use this toolkit, and we're really keen to get feedback from you in terms of how this is functioning, if it makes sense to you, if you think it's helpful. And then, as Michael mentioned earlier, this is a live tool. So we'll be constantly working to update and improve this tool and add practices as well. So if you see that you know about a practice that is missing, we'd also be keen to hear from you to add that in. So I'm now going to invite Frank back up to talk to us in more detail about how the group exercises are going to work.
Good. Can I have the slide? Yeah. Good. We're going to do a group exercise. So basically, there are 6 tables. You have a laptop. There's a screen. And there's a challenge, a different challenge at each table, as Rebecca also explained. So please read that, and then access the toolkit by sort of clicking the right filters, and you will get a long list of possible good practices. The idea is, discuss these in your group. As Rebecca showed, you can also click on that particular good practice to get a little bit more information, more detail about the cost benefits, about the specifications. And then in the end, use the discussion. You have about 20 minutes for this to select the 3 best practices for your challenge. I mean, we cannot do everything. So as a sort of economy of objectives, try to come to a consensus that for our challenge, these are the three things we really would like to dive deeper into. After that, we would like to also use this session, because it's really important. The toolkit has been demonstrated and tested in a few places, but we're at the beginning, so it's really valuable to get your feedback. Yeah, and basically, we want to ask first everybody to fill in a small personal assessment and then discuss it in the group to get some maybe some more discussion. And then in the end, we just want to walk around and find out what were your three best practices. So I think here you go. Yeah. So there is a moderator at each table. There's also documents at each table. You know, the introduction to the toolkit is there. The challenge is there. Some explanatory things are there as well. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And maybe also we can, there are some people not sitting in any group. Yeah. So please move to the tables, the people at the back who are not sitting in the groups. Can I invite you to join one of the groups? Yeah? Yeah? Okay, good. Yeah?
So our case study is about material reduction. That's 8.
Sustainable microsourcing and construction practices. Your road project is in the construction implementation phase. It says here group 5, the Pacific group.
Island, seashore.
Standard of the road.
So very likely island. So near shore, near
It didn't say standard of road.
Pacific Island. So we can assume it's islands near shore type, not the mountainous. Yeah, Pacific Islands. Yeah, it's there.
Standard of road. Low volume, I guess. Standard of road.
Standard of road.
Road project stage is construction and implementation.
Yeah,
Road project stage.
Yep, paved highway. So, yep, correct.
What is?
Yeah, just that. references.
Kind of gives you the baseline for
The best practices so far. I mean, you have the choices.
instructions.
Construction implementation.
We are in the construction and implementation phase. The instructions will be one application of the Green Roads Toolkit. Yes, yes.
Just make assumptions. How it's done. Just how to use it.
Okay. I think what the in terms of the instructions, we have only 20 minutes to answer this first instruction application of the Green Roads Toolkit. Several things that we need to
So you test it, brainstorm and select the top 3 practices for your project. So let's identify already. To do so many blues.
just
Okay.
go through this.
Oh yes. Do we have to open up everything? It will take time.
Just choose three.
Just choose 3 only.
Yeah. So one we just open.
It may not be the best, but somehow we just choose. Yeah, I think that. So just pick.
Let's just go for one.
3. Says 3. Top 3.
So we just choose one already.
That's one alternative. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, okay.
Okay. So 8.1.3. I'll go 9.1.1. Says sourcing local material.
Yeah.
Reuse.
Reuse. So this
Excavated
Okay, so
material.
8.34.
8.34.
Let's backtrack, see other.
3.5. That's 8.35.
5.
Yeah. Just
3.5.
go slow.
What's the last?
So we have 1 and
One
8.
more.
One more.
8.4.2?
What's that? Nine, 8 point. What's that?
I think we should also put in costing to
8.3.
that
That's
activity.
sustain.
Is that
What's
See
that?
if there's any.
Put costing to it. So we go 8.3.2.
8.3.2.
Reduce haulage costs.
Okay.
Oh, late success at the
What is
tracking.
it? Let's have
It's
a
not.
look.
It's a transport.
I mean, open it up.
Punch it.
Maybe efficient life use of site. It's for the transport side, road.
Okay. But just scroll down to where the automatic is. Best practice.
Especially tapping efficient tracking. Only. Oh, go backtrack again. Maybe there are other options.
Yeah, like from query the source of query. Yeah.
Very backtrack. One of the options.
There are
Let's, yeah.
Are we decided on that already?
Make it through.
we've got 3 now. Let's
Yeah.
So what's the next? Yeah. Insurance and specific.
It narrows down. Better for decision making, faster. Narrow down. But I mean, but the risk, you may miss something. But yeah. So there are trade-offs on both extremes because on the one hand you want to decide given time constraints, decisive, but on the other hand you may miss some point which you pointed out. But if you want an extensive study, comprehensive, analysis, everything, it may take you time, but somehow you may end up in a paralysis of analysis. I mean, so there should be a balance somehow. Yeah.
I think it depends, sir. It depends, and if you're rushing, I think I will go for shorter list, and then if I have unlimited kind of amount, I will go for longer list.
Yeah.
So water and
Yeah.
it's water and
Yeah. Yeah.
what about
can check more boxes. Say like say materials, water and land, and it's climate resilient. So if I click 1, 2, 3, 4.
Mga pilihannya nagbabago to. Nakababago ang bawat combination. Nothing. Yeah. So maybe before you start the planning and all this stuff, you start with givens, right? So the givens somehow will are your starting point. Perhaps so what are of course these are also based on assumptions. You assume that you know. Present.
Yeah, could do that.
torrential rains.
Mention it. Yeah. Okay, let's move. Let's get some things done. Progress this.
So at least we know how.
You have the feedback. No.
Sir, I have a question regarding the sources. The study, how long was it conducted? For example, for the past studies is conducted 20 years ago, 10 years ago. What's the reason?
Sa CR Bakalan.
Okay, so even if it is old. Okay.
Yeah, dynamic.
Still updating.
Yeah, it's a good. It's good.
Yeah.
Open.
The open ground.
Associated.
So the solid blue are more highly recommendable because these are the best practices. Ah, yeah, okay. Yeah, 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 okay.
And under material. Under the objective or the contributions.
Okay, I hope everyone is wrapping up and that the facilitators at each table are ready to present back. 2 minutes for each table. I'm looking at each table. Right, we'll give you 2 more minutes at Frank's request. All right, let's wrap up, please, at the tables. Okay. So since my table was table number 1, I'll go first. So we had a challenge of paved highway in a relatively flat area, and our major priority was decarbonisation during the construction and implementation phase. We chose 3 practices, which were, sorry, bad English, practice 1.1.5, which is facilitating the use of fuel efficient vehicles. We also chose practice 1.3.2, which is material recycling in pavements, and then 1.4.1, which was roadside tree planting. And we had a bit of a discussion around the fact that some of the decarbonisation practices, it's not just about whether or not you have the right enabling factors, but comparing them to one another. Maybe you wouldn't do all three in the same road. For example, material recycling and green cement and newly emerging asphalt mixtures, you might just choose one of those for a particular project. So we discussed the importance of looking at all of them kind of together as a whole. And in terms of feedback, there was quite a lot, but one of the things that we did discuss might help us with our decision making is having a little bit more information about what the enabling factors really mean. So, all right, group 2. Who's group 2?
All right, we were the mountain road group, but actually we got kind of stuck with just exploring the tool and did not pick 3 options. But I think that's all right. Given the time, I'll just go straight to the feedback. So we actually had a very good overall impression. And a few comments that are, I think, nice to include or to mention, that we felt like it would be nice if new state-of-the-art things are a bit more highlighted, because there's so many things, but what is really state-of-the-art? And also a little bit the interpretation of progressive, incremental, and transformative. But we've had this discussion also internally before. And indeed a better explanation of the enablers, because, for example, about the procurement, what does it really mean and how to interpret this? And similarly for some of the practices, then if you click on it, there are a few of these practices that still actually have quite distinctively different possibilities than when you click on it. So perhaps that actually need to be specified a bit more. And some very practical things. There's now not a favorite tick option. So you keep on exploring, but it's a bit hard to keep track on what you actually like. So you need to write it down yourself, but you may actually want to be able to tick it so you can really save it for later. And the actual impact. So if you then look at it, which have then the highest benefit cost or impacts, like there are so many, but what is the relative impact between them? Of course, that's very complicated, but worth exploring. All right.
We had many of the same discussions. So group 3, if there's anything different to add, or just your practices?
Yeah. For us, the practices, like we came up with 3 practices, but the most of the time was like on discussing how the toolkit works and everything. So I will just add to the feedback mainly. So what was mentioned is that the toolkit is nice because it gives you the big picture and all the different aspects in the same, they put everything together in the same picture. So it's a bit easier for people to, better choose what is more relevant. And also the feedback is that, like, okay, it's a bit better explanation of the filter on the degree of impact and the enabling environment. And a request was if it can be done at country level, because, for example, all this, when you select a practice, then you see all the different factors that needs to be in place. But if we can just make it say, okay, for example, for this country, the design standards are there, for this country or not, so they can easily see. Yeah, but this is like, we are now a project team, so it's we couldn't do this discussion. And yes, and also on the cost and benefits, we can develop the same methodology to assess the cost and benefits in each practice, because now we have assessments for different case studies from different projects, looking at different criteria and so on. So that's the main feedback. But yeah, group 4.
Okay, for our group, we'll just present what we found from the case. So we were given that this is a metropolitan area, urban road, and flat area. So we were able to explore the project level application, and then we selected just two from the practices. So we found that roadside tree planting and sequestering CO2 would be helpful for the metropolitan area since we are looking at the city area. So just like Metro Manila, for example. So that would be helpful. And it would be a good passageway for birds and other wildlife and other biodiversity. So we also chose directing water to retain ponds and ditches at the roadside since it could stop mass flooding, again, because this is a metropolitan area, and it could also be helpful in gathering pollutants. And it could also help in naturally cooling the city, the same with the first one. So overall, this toolkit would be helpful, especially for looking at the planning stage, which was given to us.
All right, 5. Sorry, we are running a little bit late.
Yeah, so we consider ourselves high achievers and weren't happy being called Group 5, but that's what it is. In terms of other items, the one was, is there some way of linking this to a green standard? So, how many of these would you have to do to be able to say my road is 3-star green, whatever that might look like? Another one was, could there be some sort of cost rating, maybe $1, $2 signs, $3 signs to say, is this a costly thing to do? And maybe even something similar around how long would it take you to do it? That sort of side. So those were the main things, so I won't bother with that.
And Group 6.
In our group, we were assigned low volume roads, tropical area, inclusive growth, and design phase. So we found here that although there are relevant practices, there are other practices that are missing, or we noticed that there are relevant practices that we need to add here in the system. So one of that is adding basic facilities for the indigenous people and the workers in the rural areas. And some of the feedback we got was to add or how to update the information or the toolkit or the checklist or the other solutions. Yeah.
No, those are really good points. And actually, if you do open up the toolkit on the ADB website and you go all the way to the first sheet, it says introduction, and then you scroll all the way to the bottom of that sheet, you'll see Michael's email address. And if you do have any important, suggestions or in particular practices that you would like to share and see included in the Green Roads Toolkit, this is not a static tool, and we're always looking to introduce new practices. So please get in touch. Please share those practices with us. So what we'd like to do now, because we are running very late, is to quickly bring up that Menti again from the very beginning and ask you all to scan the QR code or go to that menti.com using the code on the screen, 38065989. Because this is a training workshop after all, so we're keen to see how your knowledge may have changed through the afternoon. Okay, 23, we're going to go with that. Yep. All right. So, are you familiar with with good practices for green roads after today? Okay, this is good. We're seeing progress from the survey we took at the beginning. So a few more very familiar and extremely familiar. I'm worried about those who are still not at all familiar. Come see us after the session, please. Yeah, and that is an interesting observation as well. Maybe they left though. We have lost some people, so maybe the other person left. All right, the next question. How confident are you in using green road practices in your work? Let's see if this has changed. Oh man. Still, it's the same two, extremely confident. Oh no, they're not at all confident. So either we've got a troll in the room or we did not, or we didn't do our job very well. Dear. All right. And the last question. Which green roads themes are most important in your work? And you can select up to 3 of these themes. All right. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. No environmental scientists in the room. Look, but this is really interesting actually, and interesting. Okay. I'm keen to hear why nobody chose biodiversity. Does anyone want to comment on that? Nobody, or it doesn't. Maybe it's not seen as the job of the highway engineer. All right, is that everything? Okay. Frank, did you want to say anything in closing? Like, from our perspective, from ADB's perspective, I'd just like to thank you all for your active participation today. And if you do have any questions, as I said, you can reach out to Michael. You can also reach out to myself. I'm Rebecca Stapleton. You can find my email on the website somewhere, I'm sure. But yeah, so thank you from our perspective, and over to Frank.
Yeah, I don't have much to add, only to repeat, which was, I think this was a very lively afternoon. And what was already mentioned, that this toolkit is a live thing, so this fits actually the spirit that we have here. It's an ongoing work, and yeah, we all hope that you can contribute to it, not only apply, but also contribute and be part of the community. And we have a community of practice, so we ask you to fill in the form and also give your name. So with that, you will be on the mailing list. There will be regular updates and regular webinars to keep this community, which we all are, alive. Yeah. And they can also opt out. They can unsubscribe. Yeah, that's right. Yes. No, then you get on another list. Yeah. Okay, good. So yeah, I want to give a big hand to all of you. I think it was fantastic.